Hello, my name is Joshua Weis, and I'm pleased to be presenting our abstract, Thriving or Surviving, a critical examination of funding models for Fellowship Council fellowships. I have no relevant disclosures. As you may know, the Fellowship Council was established in 1997 to oversee fellowships in advanced GI, advanced GI-MIS, bariatrics, non-ACGME colorectal and thoracic, flexible endoscopy, and hepatobiliary pancreatic training. It now trains over 200 fellows per year and has a competitive match rate with around 60% of applicants matching into a program. However, despite the high-quality training offered by the Fellowship Council, they do not receive funding through similar mechanisms as ACGME programs, where fellows' funding is guaranteed by Medicare and GME funds. Instead, these fellowships use alternative funding methods, but little is published in the literature regarding the mechanisms they use for funding their programs. So the aim of our current study was to investigate the funding models of the Fellowship Council fellowships. To do this, we obtained IRB approval to administer an electronic survey to all 167 Fellowship Council programs. We sent an invitation email with a link to the survey. After 2 weeks, a follow-up email reminder was sent out to complete the survey to those who had not responded. After 2 additional weeks, we placed a single phone call to the program coordinator and invited them to complete the survey via a phone interview. Here's an example of an item on the survey asking programs to submit cost data on their fellow. In this example, an advanced GI-MIS bariatric fellow is selected through the program, and the program is asked to give details of the salary, benefits, malpractice, academic allotments, or other costs associated with running the fellowship. Similarly, they were then asked to disclose funding sources, whether the funds came from the department or division, the hospital system, whether they generated revenue by billing for their fellow as an assistant or junior faculty, and whether they received other sources of funding, such as funding from industry, grants, or other mechanisms. As an internal control, we also obtained de-identified grant application data from the Foundation for Surgical Fellowships. This foundation provides grants to Fellowship Council fellowships in order to help them offer high-quality fellowships each year. Fellowships must reapply for funding each year that they desire a grant. In many cases, there was missing data from our FC survey, either because it was not entered or was not available when we interviewed the program coordinator over the phone. In order to account for this missing data, we replaced it with imputed data using the mean of the remainder of the available data set. Cost data and funding data was compared from our FC survey to the FSF application data to check for accuracy. Overall, 60 programs completed our survey for a 36% response rate, and we were able to get de-identified information for 116 FSF grant applications. Here are the results of our cost data. Interestingly, the data from the FSF applications and the Fellowship Council survey were very similar. You can see the average values of salary, benefits, malpractice, academic allowance, and the total cost of having a fellow. As you can see, the cost of a fellow is about $110,000 per year. To display it another way, here you see a pie graph that shows the percent contributions of individual elements of fellowship costs. Salary makes up almost 2/3 of the cost of hosting a fellow, whereas benefits and malpractice make up the bulk of the remaining third, and academic allowance a minority of the cost of hosting a fellow. This is the data from the FSF applications, and as you can see, it very closely resembles the data from the Fellowship Council survey. When looking at how programs receive funding, again, the data was very similar between the FC survey and the FSF data. Approximately 80% of programs receive funding from their department to support their fellowship. About a quarter of programs receive some support from the hospital where the fellow rotates. About a third of programs generate revenue by having their fellow bill as an assistant. And within the FC survey, about 3/4 of programs reported receiving grants. Nearly all programs from the FSF data reported receiving grant funding, as would be expected, as these are programs applying for grants. In aggregate, FC fellowships obtain about 20% of their funding through grants, an additional 15 to 20% from their hospital system, and the remainder either directly from their department or from funds generated as their fellow billing as an assistant. This is a box and whisker plot showing the range of costs per fellow based on the FC survey data. The boxes indicate the interquartile range, and the whiskers indicate the 5th to 95th percentiles. As you can see, there is a wide range in total cost per fellows, salaries, benefits, and malpractice. The data looks very similar from the FSF dataset, with the cost of a fellow ranging anywhere from $65,000 up to almost $150,000. There are limitations of this study, including an intermediate response rate on the FC survey and a moderate frequency of missing data. However, although historically fellowship programs are somewhat hesitant to share detailed financial information, our results from both our FC survey and our FSF applications indicate similar findings and support the accuracy of these data. You can see from our data that fellowship costs vary widely, and the observed variances, especially in salary, may warrant further examination by the Fellowship Council. Most programs seem to rely heavily on subsidies from both internal sources within their department and external sources such as grants. Interestingly, 14% of programs were able to generate a net positive revenue, with an average surplus of $16,000 by having a fellow. The remaining 86% were budget neutral. Given the value of these fellowships and the inherent vulnerabilities associated with graduate medical education funding, it is important that we examine new alternative grant funding models for Fellowship Council fellowships. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.